Crimea was Vladimir Putin's showcase of power, but that showcase is now crumbling. The peninsula has become a center of uncertainty, deprivation, and logistical siege for more than 2 million people. The latest and most frightening evidence of this transformation occurred on January 28th. As Crimea was rocked by attacks, the Kerch Bridge connecting Russia to the mainland was completely shut down. This is not a simple bridge closure or a temporary traffic disruption. The Kerch Bridge is the lifeline of the peninsula. Closing the bridge risks disrupting the entire system, from healthcare to transportation to the delivery of basic necessities. The roots of this risk go back much further than January 28th, to decisions made by the Kremlin out of fear. On December 26, 2025, Russia developed a panic reflex in response to Ukraine's threat of sabotage. A total of 212 additional checkpoints were set up on the roads leading to the Kerch Bridge. These measures aimed to search and inspect 17,520 vehicles per day. This practice paralyzed bridge traffic, extending truck queues for hours. The ongoing measures, combined with the 7-hour full closure on January 28th, created a logistical strangulation. Look at the massive bus queues that formed at likely a public square or area near Kerch or Simferopol. These queues were not just a waiting game for people unable to get to work. They were a snapshot of the helplessness of a population with nowhere to escape. However, this was just the tip of the iceberg. The events did not only affect civilian life. The closure of the bridge could cause a serious slowdown in the transport chain. This logistical bottleneck also puts market balances within Crimea at a delicate point. The possibility of a disruption in market shipments could trigger public concerns. What will happen to food security if the bridge closes completely? This leads to a tendency to stockpile. The limited capacity of ferries and the variability of winter conditions turn the peninsula's self-sufficiency into a major strategic question mark. The most dangerous aspect of these uncertainties emerges when combined with Crimea's chronic fuel and water problems. Throughout 2025, Ukraine's systematic attacks on Russian refineries and fuel depots had already caused a serious fuel shortage on the peninsula. So much so that in September 2025, gasoline and diesel prices were frozen and a limit of 30 liters of fuel per person was imposed on drivers. Now, the closure of the bridge in this manner may pave the way for such actions to occur more frequently. These images shatter the illusion that the Kremlin has been trying to build for years. Everything is normal in Crimea. There is complete stability. Queues at gas stations stretch for miles. AI-95 gasoline and diesel are completely depleted in many districts. In large cities like Simferopol, gasoline is now sold only with coupons or cards. Drivers are desperately asking in local chat groups where their fuel is, while prices have skyrocketed to 90 rubles. If the logistics of a peninsula depend solely on road transport, and that road transport is constantly targeted, then that region is no longer a sustainable living space. It is an isolated ghetto.
The water crisis is the darkest part of the picture. After the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam, northern Crimea was already succumbing to drought, and the agricultural sector was on the verge of collapse. At a time when reservoir levels have fallen to critical levels, tankers carrying water or water purification equipment from outside becoming stranded at the bridge could turn the humanitarian crisis into a catastrophe. The countdown has begun in the tourist paradise of Alushta. Only 85 to 90 days of water remain. In crowded cities such as Sebastopol and Simferopol, the taps are only turned on for a few hours a day. People are worried not only about fuel, but also about clean water. This situation proves that Russia's propaganda about developing Crimea is gone, replaced by a struggle for survival. From a military perspective, the picture is a complete nightmare for the Kremlin. More than 60,000 Russian soldiers are also facing the same drought. Each soldier needs an average of 80 to 100 liters of water per day for basic needs such as drinking, hygiene, food preparation, and equipment cooling. However, the amount of water that can reach some military bases in Crimea is limited to only 20 to 30 liters per day, and this amount can often only be transferred to command centers, not to the entire unit. This means that a 1,000-strong unit receives only 30,000 liters of water at best. But thirst is not the only nightmare for Russian soldiers. Russian units on the southern front, particularly along the Zaporizhia and Kherson lines, are heavily dependent on supply lines coming through Crimea for ammunition, winter equipment, and fuel. When the trains stop, the artillery at the front falls silent. When the trucks get stuck on the bridge, the tanks run out of fuel. A 7-hour interruption can turn into days of ammunition shortages at the front. This is Ukraine's strategic genius, paralyzing Russian soldiers logistically before engaging them at the front. With the closure of the bridge, it is only a matter of time before Russia's military operations in the south suffer serious disruption and large gaps appear in its defensive lines.
The Russian Defense Ministry tried to downplay the situation by saying, "We shot down more than 10 UAVs. However, data from the field and satellite images point to a much more devastating reality. The chain of events began in the early hours of Wednesday, January 28th. Russian occupation authorities immediately closed the Crimean bridge to traffic. This was the moment the first intelligence of an impending major airstrike was received. However, Russian air defense systems proved inadequate to stop the approaching threat. According to reports from the Crimean Wind Monitoring Group, simultaneous explosions began to be reported at different points on the peninsula. The center of the attack was the Russian Air Force's most strategic bases in Crimea, Belbek, Saki, and Kacha. At exactly 7:39 Kyiv time, 2 very loud explosions were heard in the Belbek airbase area near Sevastopol. Belbek is one of the most critical military facilities protecting Crimea's airspace, where Russia deploys its Su-27 and Su-30 fighter jets. The explosions here show that Ukraine is targeting not only the bridge, but also the air umbrella protecting it. Not only Belbek, but the Saki airbase in Novofedorivka was also under fire. Saki had previously been the target of Ukrainian attacks, inflicting heavy losses to Russian aviation. Explosions were also heard near Cape Fioland throughout the night. Cape Fioland is a strategically vital point where Russia's electronic warfare systems and long-range radar stations are located. Striking this area is part of Ukraine's strategy to blind Russia's eyes, allowing its drones and missiles to move more freely in Crimean skies. In addition, a powerful attack on Kacha airfield was reported around midnight. Kacha is a base for helicopters and maritime patrol aircraft belonging to the Russian Black Sea Fleet. These simultaneous strikes indicate that Ukraine is using the saturation attack tactic, overloading Russian air defense systems by locking them onto multiple targets simultaneously, allowing the main strike missiles to penetrate the defense shield. Russian authorities declaring a drone threat across the peninsula and activating air raid alerts confirms the scale of the attack. However, the most striking detail is that the attack was not limited to UAVs, but was likely supported by modernized missiles or decoys. This is because the closure of the Kerch Bridge, one of the most heavily guarded structures in the world, for 7 hours, points to a much more serious threat than a simple drone swarm. This closure reflects the panic order from Russian commanders. "We can't tell which missiles are real and which are fake. Stop everything." Technical analyses indicate that these attacks are driven by the hybrid use of Ukraine's developing domestic UAV technology and long-range missiles supplied by the West. The measures Russia has taken to protect the Kerch Bridge are ineffective against modern guidance systems, from the truck explosion in 2022, the 2023 sea drone attacks, to this complex air attack in early 2026. All of these prove that Ukraine is constantly developing new, creative, and unstoppable methods to strike the bridge. This event is much more than a tactical success. It is proof that the Putin regime's strategic vision for Crimea has been devastated. The Kerch Bridge is not just a pile of concrete and steel for Vladimir Putin. It is the physical symbol of Crimea's eternal union with Mother Russia. Every closure of the bridge, every attack alert, and every explosion creates irreparable cracks in Putin's image as a strong leader. The 7-hour helplessness on January 28th is the tearing up of the Kremlin's biggest promise, the stability and security contract before the eyes of the Crimean people. Putin's doctrine was simple: Crimea is a fortress and Russia will protect it at any cost. However, recent events show that the walls of this fortress are made of paper. Russia is taking such extreme and paranoid measures to protect the bridge that these measures negate the very purpose of the bridge's existence. A superpower that disrupts its own logistics line out of fear is strategically cornered. This situation means that while Russia is trying to defend Crimea militarily, it is losing it administratively and economically. You can hold a region with tanks, but if you cannot meet the basic needs of the people, you are not governing that region.
The actors Putin sees as his closest backyard are rapidly distancing themselves from Moscow as they see that Russia is incapable of protecting even its own territory and most strategic logistical lines. Russia's having to beg Belarus for gasoline after the fuel crisis is the most dramatic example of how the balance of power has shifted. Russia's allies are now asking, how can a power that cannot defend its own bridge and peninsula protect us? This climate of distrust further deepens the Kremlin's isolation on the international stage. NATO and Western allies are watching this process very closely. Russia's logistical weakness is reshaping NATO's strategic planning on its eastern flank. If Russia cannot supply its own stronghold, how will it ensure logistical sustainability in a large-scale conventional war? This question deals a major blow to Russia's military deterrence. Projections that Russia's total losses could reach 2 million by 2026 are directly linked to the weakness created by such logistical paralysis. Strategically, the logistical stranglehold is fully operational here. Ukraine is forcing Russia to make a choice in Crimea: either continue to feed this death trap by spending enormous resources or look for ways to gradually withdraw from the peninsula. The 212 checkpoints on the bridge are actually a barricade that Russia has erected for itself. As security increases, efficiency decreases. As efficiency decreases, the crisis deepens. It's a vicious cycle, and Putin's regime is stuck in it. The most painful part of the strategic checkmate is the tearing up of that implicit social contract with the Russian people. Putin had promised the Russian people security and stability in exchange for political silence. However, the civilian panic in Crimea, the bus queues on the streets of Sevastopol, and the fading lights show that this contract no longer holds any weight. The increasing activities of Crimean Tatar resistance groups and local sabotage networks are proof that Russia has also lost the peninsula from within. The war is no longer a propaganda show on television, but a reality that has come to the doorstep of Russian citizens, cutting off their fuel and destroying their security. Every light that went out on the Kerch Bridge symbolized the fading of the Kremlin's control over Crimea. That 7-hour deep silence was the loudest cry of Russia's logistical and military bankruptcy. The bridge that Putin called untouchable is no longer a lifeline for the Russian army, but a noose around their necks. There is no fuel, no water, and no peace left in Crimea. All that remains are broken promises and an impending collapse. Strategic blindness is complete. The bear's eyes are now fully closed. Crimea is no longer a port, it is a grave dug by Russia's own hands. This video reminds us of that inevitable end under the fading lights. There is no safe place. War has come to your home, to your most strategic line. So, what are your thoughts on this matter? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to stay updated on PPR Global's new analyses. Thank you for choosing us.